My 4 children have known me their entire lives, and not one of them knows who I actually am. I'm Frances. I'm 84 years old. And somewhere between the first diaper I changed and the last grandchild I rocked to sleep, the woman I was before all of it got very quiet, and nobody ever thought to ask her to speak up. I don't say that with bitterness. I want to be clear about that from the start, because this isn't a story about blame or about children who failed me. It's a story about how completely a person can disappear inside a life they genuinely love, and how strange it feels at 84 to finally decide to come back. I was born in 1940 in a mill town in North Carolina, the second daughter of a textile worker and a woman who made everything from scratch and never complained about anything as far as I could tell. I was a curious child, the kind who read everything she could get her hands on and had opinions about things girls my age weren't expected to have opinions about. I wanted to be a journalist, not a secretary, not a teacher, not a nurse, though all of those were fine and good things. I wanted to write, to ask questions, to go places and report back on what I found. I had a spiral notebook I carried everywhere in high school, filled with observations about people, little portraits of the folks in our town, the way they moved and talked and contradicted themselves. My English teacher told me I had a real gift. I believed her. Then I met Gerald when I was 19, and the notebook got put in a drawer, and life moved in the direction lives moved in 1959, which was forward and fast and mostly in one lane. Gerald was a good man. I want to say that plainly because it's true, and because the story of a woman whose life narrows isn't always the story of a bad man. Gerald was funny and hardworking and devoted to his family in every practical sense. He just wasn't the kind of person who asked deep questions about himself or anyone else. He lived on the surface of things in a way that seemed to make him genuinely happy, and I loved him for it, even as I sometimes sat across from him at dinner wondering if he had any idea who was sitting there. We were married for 51 years, and I think he loved me sincerely and completely, and without ever once wondering whether he knew me. The children came quickly, 4 in 7 years. Michael, then Susan, then the twins, Paul and Diane. And with each one, I became more fully mother and less fully Frances. This happened naturally, not violently, the way a river changes course. You don't notice at first. You're too busy, too needed, too absorbed in the gorgeous chaos of small children who require everything you have. I loved it. I want to be honest about that too. I loved being a mother in a physical, cellular way that I couldn't have anticipated. The smell of their heads, the weight of a sleeping child on my chest, the way each of them laughed differently from the very beginning, like they arrived already themselves. But there was always, underneath the love, a layer of life that had nowhere to go. The girl with the spiral notebook didn't vanish. She just learned to be very quiet. I'd read a news story that made me want to write 3 paragraphs about it, and instead, I'd fold the laundry. I'd have a thought in the middle of the night, so original and complete, it felt almost electrical. And by morning, it would be gone, because morning meant lunches and arguments about shoes, and someone had a fever, and Gerald needed a shirt ironed. The thoughts kept coming, and I kept setting them aside. The way you set aside a book you mean to get back to. And one day, you look at the pile and realize some of those books have been waiting 15 years. When the children were older, I thought about going back to school. This was the early 70s. Women were doing it, returning to education, reclaiming pieces of themselves that marriage had set aside. I mentioned it once to Gerald, carefully, testing the water. He didn't react badly. He just looked puzzled in a way that was almost worse, like the idea was so outside the frame of how he saw our life that he genuinely didn't know how to organize it in his mind. He said, "What would you study?" And I didn't have a quick enough answer, because the real answer was everything, or maybe just something that's mine, and neither of those sounded like a practical response. So I let it go and got busy with something else, and the moment passed the way moments do. Here is something my children don't know. Before I married Gerald, there was someone else. His name was Daniel, and I loved him in that particular way you love the first person who ever really sees you, which is a kind of love that doesn't have an equivalent later, no matter how many years of steady partnership follow. Daniel was studying literature at the university while I was working as a typist nearby. We met at a public lecture of all things, a talk about Faulkner that neither of us had been forced to attend, which meant we were already the same kind of person before we said a word to each other. We spent 8 months talking about books and ideas and what we wanted from the world. He was the first person who ever read anything I wrote and said, without flattery, "This is real. You should keep going." He got a teaching position in Oregon. I couldn't go, or told myself I couldn't, which might have been the same thing or might not have been. We wrote letters for a year, and then we didn't. And I met Gerald 6 months after the letters stopped, and my life went the direction it went. I have thought about Daniel maybe once a month for 60 years, not with longing exactly, or not only with longing, more like the way you think about a road you didn't take, not with regret so much as with curiosity about who you would have been on it. My children have never heard that name. There are other things they don't know. They don't know that I had a miscarriage between Susan and the twins that I grieved alone, because Gerald didn't know how to hold grief, and I didn't want to burden the children. They don't know that in 1987, I started writing again, quietly, in a new notebook, and filled 40 pages before I convinced myself it was self-indulgent and stopped. They don't know that when Gerald died, alongside the genuine sorrow, there was a small, shameful pocket of something that felt like possibility, like a window opening. And that feeling frightened me so much, I spent 2 years being extra devoted to everyone around me as a kind of penance for it. They don't know that their mother had a whole interior country, wide and complicated and largely unexplored, running alongside the visible life she lived with them. Why didn't I tell them? That's the question I've sat with more and more as I've gotten older. And I think the honest answer is that I was never sure they wanted to know. Children need their parents to be stable. They need them to be consistent, reliable, the fixed point around which everything else can move. I was good at being that for them. I was less sure they could handle me being something more complicated, something more uncertain, something more like a full person with my own unresolved questions and unlived chapters. So I protected them from it, the way I protected them from everything. And the protection became habit, and the habit became identity. And one day I looked up and I was 80 years old, and the most important things about me were also the most unspoken. The thing that changed was a conversation with my granddaughter Ellie, who is 26 and studying journalism, which hit me somewhere beneath the ribs the first time she told me. She came to visit last spring, just the two of us, and we were walking in the park near my building, and she said, out of nowhere, "Grandma, what did you want to be before everything happened? Not who were you, but what did you want?" Past tense, before everything happened. Like she already understood there was a before, a woman who existed prior to the roles. I stopped walking. I think I actually stopped breathing for a moment. And then I told her about the notebook, about the journalist, about Daniel, which surprised me most of all, about the 40 pages I wrote in 1987 and destroyed, about the miscarriage and the grief I carried alone. I talked for 2 hours on that park bench, and Ellie sat there and listened the way I used to listen to things I knew mattered, with her whole body still and her eyes completely present. When I finished, she said, "Why haven't you told any of us this before?" And I said, "Because nobody asked." She looked at me a long time, and then she said, "I'm asking now. I want to know everything." I started crying, which I almost never do, not because I was sad, but because something that had been pressed down for a very long time had just been given room to rise. I've been talking more since then, to Ellie, but also to my daughter, Susan, who was surprised at first and then hungry. Hungry in the way you get when you realize you've been eating around the edges of something and you're actually starving for the real thing. I told Michael about Daniel. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "So that's where you went sometimes." I asked him what he meant. He said, "You'd get this look, just sometimes, like part of you was somewhere else." I always wondered where. He'd seen it for 40 years and never said a word, and I'd felt it for 60 years and never said a word. And here we were, finally in the same room with the same truth. It is a strange thing to be discovered at 84. Strange and good in a way that doesn't have a clean name. My children are learning a mother they didn't know they had. And I am learning that I am still here, still the woman with the spiral notebook and the opinions and the whole interior country. Not gone, not buried, just patient, waiting apparently, until someone asked. If you are the person in your family who holds things together, the one who tends and manages and never seems to need anything yourself, I want you to hear this. The people who love you are not fragile. They can know your real story. They might even be hungry for it. Your complicated self, the one with the unspoken grief and the unlived dreams and the secret name you still think about, that self deserves to take up space in your own life. You don't have to wait until you're my age for someone to ask. You can just begin talking. Start with one true thing you've never said out loud. See what happens next. In my experience, what happens next is that someone who loves you leans in and says, "Keep going." And after a lifetime of silence, there is nothing in the world quite like being told to keep going.